Natasha Junejo. I am the founder of South Asian Writers and literary lead at South Asian Heritage Month. And I'm very, very pleased to introduce Sascha Akhtar, who is an incredible, incredible woman who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of months ago. She's an educator, a translator, an author, and a writer who's published 6 poetry collections. She has 20 years of experience. She's a pleasure to talk to, and we will be discussing her latest book of Necessity and Wanting. Ignore my sticky tabs here. I've just gone through it a lot. It's an incredible, incredible book. And we'll be discussing language and culture and how the two intersect, and a great deal of things this afternoon. Sascha, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to, in particular, be talking to you, who I have found to be just so dynamic and so passionate about working with our South Asian communities. And so I feel like this is a very wonderful match. So thank you. And thank you to the Stay at Home Festival for giving us this platform.
It's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Thank you so much. You're too kind. But yes, thank you to Stay at Home Festival. We think this is an incredible thing that's come out of a very strange and challenging time. And one of the beautiful things about the last year is that there's been so many cohesive communities that have been formed in ways that we probably would not have been able to. And we've been able to find touchstones with each other and communicate with each other and connect to each other completely non-physically, and festivals like this have been made possible where we can share and when we can interact. And it's similarly what we're doing with South Asian Heritage Month, and that's how you and I met, through a platform that is about exploring identity and about culture. And it's an extraordinary thing that out of such uncertainty and horror in a lot of ways, that we can find such beautiful and powerful connections. One of the things that I personally love, speaking of which, about this book is that the ways in which I have been able to connect with my mother. We enjoy this book together. So I am based in London and my mum is in the Northwest, and we read your book together. We read it on video chats and I read it aloud to her, and it makes her feel as though she's being taken back home, and it gives her such a strong, vivid and visual sense of home. The way that you describe Pakistan, the way that you weave Urdu into English in your writing, the way that the characters speak in their mother tongue, and it's so natural. And even if you're not a proficient Urdu speaker like myself, it's such a beautiful, it's so beautifully done that it's not intimidating in any way, it's not exclusionary in any way, and it's been such a pleasure to enjoy. And I've been, in researching the book as well, so many reviews from people, which are extensive as well, so many reviews from people talk about this personal connection that they have found, and the fact that your book has become this touchstone and this vessel and almost a portal for people, both emotionally and through memory. And I think that's an extraordinary thing. And I was wondering whether that was a deliberate intention of yours when you set out to write this story, whether that you wanted it to be evocative of a place and a time for people, or whether that just happened organically.
Oh, so many wonderful things unpack in there. And I just want to highlight that this extraordinary story of you and your mom is pretty much probably the ideal kind of scenario that I could have imagined when writing this book. Because the odd thing is that, yes, it was very much my intention that as the publication date came closer and closer, I realized just how much I wished for this book to somehow be there for South Asians, diaspora, as well as, you know, people in South Asia, to sort of feel connected to their own culture.
Mm.
So, and I'm hearing these things reflected back at me from, you know, sensitive readers like yourself and others. And I myself wonder, you know, how this came to be. And then one wonders if perhaps the power of intention is really quite, you know, it's something to be, if you really intend something, then, especially me, because I really do believe in this idea of intention. But the other part of it is, I wonder, as a you know, as immigrants, you see, because I am a first generation myself immigrant, where I, you know, left home at 18 and wandered about, you know, rootlessly. Um, and I wonder if, and this may be the case with other writers, if our memories become so, as immigrants and writers, become so charged with emotion that perhaps, you know, my need to put these memories down as a document of my own childhood, of my own feelings for Karachi, because somebody else said that it was like a love letter to Karachi. And this was Dr. Sophia, and she picked that up. And it's true, because I do love Karachi, and like no matter where I've been or where I go, Karachi is sort of, you know, embedded in here. So it's very interesting, this idea of how memory is charged for all of us actually with emotion.
Mm.
So perhaps the way we delineate our emotions, if we are creative people, that then becomes charged with that emotion. And emotion is universal. So your mother's emotions and my emotions, perhaps they connect in that way. Do you know what I mean?
100%. It's one of those things that whenever I ask, and have done historically and previously, um, whenever I've asked my mother to describe home to me and tell me stories about home, and when I've asked my late father to as well growing up, there are some very, very vivid memories, and that give me an idea of what it was like. But you can never reach further enough into, as a third, when you're a third culture kid and you're straddling two cultures and you're born here and your parents are from somewhere else, there's always that hunger and that yearning of, I want to just know exactly what it was like for you, and I want to transport myself there, and I want to live in your shoes for a moment, and I need to know how it feels. I need to know. And there's been that ever so slight disconnect where you are piecing together that experience of what's in your bones and in the bones and marrow of who you are, because it makes up all of you, and you're trying to piece that together, and it's through this fragmented um, storytelling. And this has been such a beautiful experience because it almost fills in those gaps, and it's been a bridge for me personally. It's been this extraordinary bridge between my mother's anecdotal sort of stories that have been the framework of building this idea of home, quote unquote home, and then all of this which fills in the beautiful detail. And there's so the way that you write is so lyrical and it's so poetic, and I'm just telling everybody about it because it's this wonderful, it's wonderful, it's so restorative, and it's something that, as I'm in my 30s, and a lot of other um, kids that I know, like a lot of other Asian people I know, and BIPOC people that I know around this age are searching for that, a
Yeah.
similar sense of completing that idea of where your parents come from, and understanding the self as a whole, as we decolonize ourselves, as we do that through literature and art and history. There's also this internal um, this internal process that needs to happen. And this has been such an important part of that, and it's been such a pleasure. But it's why I'm only halfway through, because I'm doing it with somebody else, and I want to just get through it as quickly as possible. But it's an extraordinary thing, and memory is a character in this book, in the same way that language is its own character in this book, and they are very, very, very powerful things.
Yeah.
And I wanted to sort of ask you about the choices that you've made linguistically, because your background, and there's so much of your interest area as well that is focused on language and the importance of preserving your mother tongue. Yeah. And you can see that the love letter to language as well, yeah, in this book. And I just wanted to understand a little more about your decisions around that, and how the reception to that has been.
Yeah, a number of things to respond to what you were saying. When I imagined this book, I was reviewing, I've done a lot of work for South Asian, like promotion of South Asian literature in my 30s. Much like yourself, I was dedicated. I would read every single book by South Asian, and I would get it reviewed. I did a lot of reviews for Libas, for a lot of Herald, for Pakistani newspapers. And I think I built up this kind of idea, like of a unified South Asian literature in my head from years of research, really. And I think that the thing about decolonization, of course, is very, very interesting, because you see, for Pakistani publishing, we struggle. We don't really, there isn't really a solid foundation for writing in English, right? And the fact is that, so it's a little complex, and I really want to address this. So our post-colonial sort of heritage is English, as well as sort of Urdu being seen as lesser or inferior, which is seen that way not by the very vibrant Urdu speaking community, which is huge. So we have Urdu literature and Urdu publishing community, but English rears its head. So it's not good enough in our post-colonial heritage to just, be writing in Urdu, be speaking in Urdu. But then it's also bifurcated further by economics, where the privileged who have a bit of money get to send their kids to English medium schools. So there is this, again, so bifurcation of land, my theory is it has led to bifurcation in every way, right? So you send your kids to English medium. Now imagine this has been going on. Pakistan is going to be 70 years old next year. So imagine this has been going on now for like 40 years or whatever. So there's generations upon generations. So it's not just people like yourself who are, part of the diaspora, but it's within one's own country that the effects of the post-colonial legacy are felt. So people are feeling alienated from their own language within Pakistan. What is that? You know what I'm saying? Like, come on. So I spoke to many people, and I sensed from my time just, being interested in the South Asian diaspora here, I sense this, and I felt the loss of it. And I'm just fortunate because I went to an English medium school, by the way. But I guess because my Nana, my grandfather, was a poet and a writer in Urdu, I had a bit of, exposure. And I think, because, I'm also a poet, I've been writing poetry for a long time. So I fell in love with Urdu poetry, for the nuances, the gestures, the complexity of the language. So I think that love of Urdu, it propelled me to share that love of Urdu. Now, so as I said, it's complex, but getting to the book, I was always very clear that I wanted to include Urdu in the book. Now, I don't see that as particularly radical. Like, it makes sense. It made total sense to me, right? It's like all Pakistanis, we all speak English and Urdu. But I made the decision, and trust me, people don't realize how long this book has like been bubbling. It's been a very long time. And I was told categorically by people, publishers, editors, that I should take the Urdu out, right? But this is what's interesting, going back to Pakistani publishing. So what the Pakistani writer has to do and does is cater to the Western audience, right? And this is a thing. I'm not just saying this, it's a thing. So people weren't interested in my stories because they're too Pakistani. So, but I was always clear that my focus, I'm writing for Pakistanis primarily, because I just wanted to get out of that whole like pandering to Western publishers thing. That's why it took so long to publish, right? It took the 87 press to be born that, prides itself on publishing marginalized voices. And for them to say, hell yeah, we'll publish it with the Urdu. Um, so I even wanted to take a step further and have the Urdu in Urdu script, but that would have been a nightmare for publishing. So yeah, I mean, I could talk forever about this. So thank you for asking that important question. And I believe you wanted me to read at this juncture, which I will be happy to do. Yeah?
I'd love that.
Okay, cool. So I am going to read. So just to let you guys know, there's the form of this book is also sort of I guess it can be called experimental, but it really isn't, because in our Urdu short stories, we had this form of sane, the short story form. So there's 2 novellas and a long short story. So I'm going to read from the last one, which is called Jannat Ki Hawa, or The Air in Paradise. And the protagonist is Javed, who works in the ID card office. And the other is the Zainab. And this is actually towards the end. So I invite you to just, let the words just sort of wash over you and forget, like, I know you've not read the rest of the story, but I think it's going to be all right. So Javed is having a pensive evening this evening. He gets very fed up of all the normal things for a Pakistani, which is no bijli, dirty water, all kinds of stuff, flooding. He rides a scooter, so fair enough. Tonight, Javed walked right onto the beach, craving the cool sands under his feet, the all-encompassing sound of the waves raging in his ears. Since the big sellout of Clifton Beach to the Arabs, all kinds of improvements had taken place. There were giant floodlights illuminating everyone's activities. Benches now. Attempts to keep the area clean had been made, attempts that seemed to fail. Javed rolled up his trousers, took off his bata chappals, and holding them in one hand, headed towards the waters lapping at the shore, walking for what seemed like hours. His trousers got soaked, but he felt invigorated, having washed off the frustrations of a day in Karachi. bathing in the holy waters of her Ganga. Eh, Sherjan ji, khana mil jayega? Hello, Sherjan. Can I get some food? Javed approached his mustachioed friend Sherjan, squatting over the rim of a giant clay oven, expertly slapping wet dough onto the insides of the orange glowing cavity. His younger brother Akhtar Jan on the other side of the assembly line then deftly removed the freshly baked naan bread with a long iron rod hooked at the end. The operation required a great deal of expertise for it to move efficiently. Sher Jan had been doing this for 30 years and proudly proclaimed that he had never yet lost a naan to the fires of the tandoori. The aroma of the hot naans filled the air and Javed's stomach emitted an audible rumble. Are Javed, kya huliya bana rakha hai yaar? Javed, my boy, look at the state of you. Sherjan remarked with concern. Come, come, sit. Why are you roaming the seashore like a man who has lost his lover? You should at least eat first. His voice boomed loud and deep, echoing through in the tandoori, whilst his face glowed in the light of its fires. This was the warm hearth of Javed's life. Sher Jan was like a father in this crazy city of Karachi, showing concern as he did about Javed's health, happiness, and above all, lack of mustache. He insisted that Javed must grow a mustache, not unlike his own bristling Punjabi specimen. He would proudly twirl it on either end whilst musing under the stars over a cup of cha at the end of a long night serving the hordes of Karachi at Clifton Beach. Much nahi te kuch nahi, sain. If you have no mustache, you have nothing, my son, he would boom at Javed. You must grow one. You'll see, you'll become a man. Javed would listen politely, nodding his head at Sherjan, but he was sure that a mustache, such as the one Sherjan wanted him to cultivate, needed an entirely different species of man to carry it off. He was too lanky. His hair was a thick black thatch that he carefully coffered every day with brill cream mind. He preferred English-style shirts and trousers to shalwar kameez, and his skin, he decided, was the color of nahari, the traditional Pakistani meat stew. So, brother, have your dreams come any closer? Sherjan's brother, the thinner, younger version of the elder, also with vigorous mustache but quiet demeanor, asked Javed. No, brother, I am pretty much the same as when I last spoke to you, Javed replied. But you wear the English clothes. You ride the English scooter. Have you learned actual English yet or no? Athirjan asked him. Many a night Javed had sat late with them, sometimes serious, sometimes jesting, about a time when he too would walk and talk the English talk.
Thank you so much. That was such a pleasure to listen to. It really was.
Cool. I hope it's not too much of a spoiler.
No, no, no. It's great. I love it. I remember you telling me about this when we first had a conversation, if you don't have a mustache or nothing.
Yes, it's one of my favorite scenes, and I also just love the naan shops in Pakistan. There's a very special experience to visit a naan shop in Pakistan, and you can only have it in Pakistan. It's so sensory. So I really wanted to, and then Sherjan just came alive as I've seen so many of these guys, and they're so dedicated, and they do usually have mustaches.
There's such a visual element to your writing, and that ties in with memory, but even it ties in with language as well. There's the way that you weave such a visual aspect to the scenes that you're describing, and I think that's so key in why people are resonating with your work. And I find this a lot, and I wonder whether it's true in your case as well. People that have a strong background in poetry tend to write this way, and tend to write in ways that, like you say, that memory in that scene to you is sensory. And I would argue that that's your entire writing style.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. To be honest, I have a very long, I mean, it's not that long, it's about 20 years, but it's a history of visual arts. I come from a visual art background, so I originally was wanted to be a filmmaker. And I did. I mean, I still sort of am. I'm just not, it's like I'm sort of, I say I'm a polymath, because whatever sort of idea I wish to project, I then use the form. And there's a lot of mad people like me, that, we drive ourselves crazy doing this. But I've done film. I'm also an art photographer, and I have had exhibitions. I have a vast photographic body of work. Um, and with my poetry, I'm definitely known for my visual style, you know. So, and I think at the core of everything I do is I really believe in full immersion.
Mm.
So, and then also like smells, tastes. As a writer, I feel like, as advice to other writers, even as a practice, really enter the space, and what does it smell like, what does it sound like, what does it taste like,
Mm.
um so I think that's very much part of my own writing practice, is this sort of full immersion idea. um and in the case of Pakistan, it's really quite easy for someone with that kind of a aesthetic sense, because Pakistan is a full immersion experience, frankly.
Mm. I agree with you. In terms of language,
Yeah.
it's clear to me anyway, from someone that knows you and is getting to know you better, that that is such an important part of the work that you do. Not only obviously in this book, but in terms of the preservation of um, mother tongue, the um, the promotion as well of writing in Urdu, of different media, of poetry in Urdu. I know that you do a great deal of work with the Stephen Spender Trust as well. Would you like to tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing my best to, as and it's all part of this same ethos of mine, to sort of give, or try in some small part to give, so this idea of loss, so for a lot of immigrants, second generation, first generation. Well, the first generation was too busy, like fighting racism in the 80s, and, trying to make a living and raise their families, to pay attention to this sort of idea of passing on, like, their language. And this is obviously not just true for Urdu, but obviously all this Pahari, Kashmiri, Pahari, Tamil, so much. Um, and I see that as a it's not a symptom, but yeah, that's like a result of this. Um, and also, I will refer to something that you had told me, that, children in the 80s in school were actively dissuaded from speaking
Mm.
their home mother tongues in their homes. It was seen as, and we all know these were seen as the correct integration policies, and this is how people had to integrate. And, fair enough in some way, where I do understand the need for people to learn the language of where they are. I actually do think that that's just a polite thing to do.
Yeah.
I do think that. And I come from, because in my family, I had a family member who refused to learn the language where she had gone, and that caused a lot of problems. So, but obviously the way that the governments, successive governments, did it is, it's not right. It's resulted in many people feeling this sense of loss. So now I can't personally address everyone's sense of loss, but yeah, with the Stephen Spender Trust over this pandemic year, which is so crazy because we were meant to go, I'm working with kids through them. They were funded for an Urdu Spotlight year, which is, I'm so grateful for that. So we've been going sort of, well, it's been creating workshop materials to translate, for children to translate from Urdu into their own creative English translations. We've been facilitating that, and the kids have been giving really lovely feedback. Um, somebody, I think it was another translator, she had told me this story, about a little girl who had done Urdu in a workshop, and it just, it echoed, it gave her a reflection of where she comes from immediately, where for a lot of the immigrant children, you feel like you have to shut that part off, and nobody knows it and nobody understands it, and you can't talk about it, so you enter increasingly into this sense of alienation. So, and that is part of the Stephen Spender Trust like drive, is it's all these things. It's not just, as you and I have discussed this, how language is the body, is emotion, so it's a way to give back, um and then the Stephen Spender Trust is opening the prize, which is been going on for a long time, with an Urdu spotlight. So I'm helping sort of curate this booklet, and with maybe as many poems as I can muster, Urdu poems, and then children between the ages of 5 to 18 can maybe choose those poems, from those poems to translate. I mean, we'd really love people to send in translations from Urdu. That would be amazing. And but this particular spotlight that I'm doing is for the ages 5 to 18. But of course, anyone can send in any translation from Urdu. In fact, please do it, guys. We need it.
I love that. It's so interesting what you're saying as well, because this is part of the post-colonial legacy, and I have so many conversations with people about this, that intergenerational trauma of things that we are sitting with and dealing with many generations after the people that actually, well, not many, only two now, after the people that went through partition, that were under the British Raj, all of that. There are so many things to be dealing with, but the structures that existed and still do persist in the society that we live in now, all of that is part of the post-colonial legacy, and particularly with language, like you said, and like we've spoken about before, so many people like myself lost their mother tongue when they were younger, because there were structures in place in the education system at that time that heavily stressed to parents when we were very, very young, that if you want your child to progress and develop in this country, and at home, within the education system, you cannot speak your language with them at home, speak English with them at home. Because my first language was Punjabi. My parents are Punjabi and Sindhi couple, so my father would speak Urdu at home to my mum, and my mum would speak Punjabi back to him. So that was the two languages that would be flying over my head in the house. And then Punjabi was my first language. And then I went to school and then I was learning English. And we were banned from speaking Punjabi at home. And so then I forgot most of my Punjabi and just spoke English. But then we would hear these two languages that my parents spoke to each other. And it's only when you're older that you consider how that must have felt as parents, not to be able to speak your own language with your children. And the knot of Punjabi and Urdu that's been between my brain and my mouth since it's something I could never untangle, despite trying to access the languages, trying to learn both. I could not unhear the difference between the two. They were one Frankenstein language, and when I tried to speak them around Asian people, they'd be like, "What is this lady saying? I don't know what she's saying. She's talking nonsense." Because I couldn't, my brain couldn't unattach them, and that was my legacy with language. And I was like, oh great, that racism, institutional racism, that's fantastic. But then I started learning Korean this year, and there's something about learning a new language that's a completely different alphabet but similar sounds to Punjabi, similar words to Punjabi, and it has unlocked something in my mind, and it has gone around the back of my brain and unattached those two languages, and Punjabi is slowly coming back, so that now when I have an emotion, when I'm angry or happy, the word that's in my inner monologue is not English anymore. It's Punjabi, and sometimes it's a Korean word, and sometimes it's English, but it's mainly a Punjabi word. And it's an extraordinary thing to have to go on this journey to, and it wasn't intentional, but now I'll be recommending it to everybody. I'll be like, learn Korean, it might help. But it's an extraordinary
No, I
thing
think
to.
that's extraordinary, Natasha. And
Mm,
you describe this journey so eloquently, and I love hearing about it because it's so important to have this kind of observation of your inner processes when it comes to this kind of thing. And I think that, a teacher of mine once talked about something called a positive shock for
mm,
change to occur, that there needs to be this kind of positive shock. And I do feel that it makes sense, this Korean um, giving you sort of license to, think in another language, because as we were saying, the intergenerational trauma, you feel like a block gets made, like, oh no, mustn't speak Punjabi, mustn't speak Urdu, and your brain sort of, the neural pathways. So it's like language, tongue, heart, you know, like
yeah,
must,
just
which is really wild.
it's an extraordinary thing. And I would always refer to it as my mother tongue being colonized out of my mouth. And the way that these classes work, the way that the sessions work, and what I've always admired about the access to language in Urdu that you really put so much effort into, is that it is so accessible to people that don't need any prior knowledge in the language. The transliteration is there. It's available to everybody. It's so much so that young children who don't have any language skills in the particular language that you're teaching them can access it in a day, and then they get exposed to a different culture. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think it's extraordinary work. It really is.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Um, I did think about which bits to choose, and what came was from memory, like bits that we all sort of could maybe pick up, that we may have heard. And it's interesting because if you think about the collective, you know, from memory or from our parents, hearing our parents, which bits may stick. Um, so it's a kind of retrieval, it's a retrieval of
Mm.
culture through these echolalia, these things that we've heard. Um, and that's, I think, in small ways through people like you and your mom. And I must say, the South Asian community, the Bookstagram, all of them have been extraordinary, very real. It's just been real. It's
Mm.
been, you know,
I
they've,
think one of the things that I think people are resonating so much with is the way, in particular in this book, the way that you tackle cultural issues, societal issues head on. And it's so unabashed, and it's very, very difficult to do, particularly with South Asian culture, to discuss the more prickly and barbed aspects of the pressures and or the difficult parts, but still, but not to denigrate who we are and where we're from. And that is a very complex relationship, and that is a very interesting thing and a difficult thing to present to the world. And
Yeah.
it's done so skillfully, and it's done with such love and respect, that when you do talk about these very real things in the first story, page 2 or 3, we're talking about colorism instantly. We're talking about how women talk when they're in beauty salons, and it is hard hitting, and it is very, quite real, and it is quite shocking. But never at any point do you think that you are trashing our culture. Do you think that you are denigrating our people and where we are from? It's just, these are the material facts of how things are, and that is a very interesting dichotomy to write into. And I think people are resonating so much with this because it's handled with so much care and so much love. And it reminds me of a graphic artist that I know of called Saba Khan, and she writes about these difficult issues as well, but there's so much care and love in the same way. I'd love to introduce you both, actually. And that's why people resonate with her work as well, in a similar fashion. Was this a deliberate choice for you, or is this just who you are?
No, I mean, I'll say something quickly about that, because I believe we've got some Q&A, and we
Oh,
may be
brilliant.
running out of time and all kinds of things are going on. But look, colorism has always pissed me off in Pakistan. I'm from a mixed race family, and so skin color, like I would go to the salon and people, they would say, oh, your mother's so gori, and you're not gori. And I was always sensitive to it. Okay, it pissed me off. And I just thought, and now in the light of all this, our post-colonial heritage, I just feel like we need to look at this. We can't just keep letting aunties and put young girls down. कि वो गोरी से शादी करनी है, like she has to be like, no, end this. And somebody had asked me about literary realism and social realism, and I think that because I write in the thing about me that people is I'm a writer first, and a writer who can adopt any style. So I chose this style because I felt that this was the best way to tackle it, with sensitivity, just telling it like it is, because this is the way it is, guys. So describing it, so showing it, I guess, the fiction workshop maxim, rather than telling it. So showing how it can pan out in somebody's life. So Goodie's life, her whole life, she's been dealing with colorism, then showing the levels of it in the salons. That's just how I saw it. um I guess I could say a lot more, but we should probably,
Yes, we should go to questions, shouldn't we?
where are they?
They are. I think they should be in there. Where are we? Ah, hello, Ali. How are you? So it's Ali from South Asian Book Club. Sasha, how important was it for you, for this book to represent Karachi and Karachi lives authentically?
It was of the utmost importance. Frankly, I will share with you that I was terrified the whole time that the book was going to publishing. The book was, because, it's my home, and these are my own friends and family, and in Karachi, people are not like, it's like I said to another reviewer that it's, we're like New Yorkers. It's like, if we don't like it, if a Pakistani doesn't like your book, you're in trouble, man. So it was very, very important. And of course, authentic is a subjective value in many ways, but the fact that readers have been using that word to me, it makes me feel like I've struck some balance. So thanks for asking that.
hang on, we've got Vicky Jones. Hi, Sascha. I really enjoyed this book. Do you have any plans or ideas for a new book?
Well, hi, Vicky. Um, yeah, the thing is I have many plans for many new books. Um, but I suppose what may be closest to this kind of thing is another collection of short stories, uh, inshallah, that may not be as deeply set in Pakistan and perhaps more universal. To be honest, ever since I read Jhumpa Lahiri years ago, with her first collection with the 9 short stories, I'm just a Jhumpa Lahiri wannabe, really. I just I just want to do short stories. I think they're extraordinary and they give me a lot as well. And I'm glad that people have been open to it, because the novella form has only been lost in the West because of money, because, agents and publishers want to discourage you from writing them because they can't sell them. But, if more of us are reading them, and actually, it's a great form because
I
it's
agree.
brief, right, Natasha? It's brief. So you're not committing to the entire, like a novel, and it's over soon. So I think let's write more novellas, and as readers, let's read more.
I agree. I think it's a great way to explore different themes as well. And I think particularly because I think it's a strength of yours because you're a poet. And so
Perhaps.
you can write into it, I think, a great deal more easily than others, and you do it so well. But yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that it's not as popular as it once was, and I think we should just bring it back.
I mean, I think it's the literary magazines.
Mm.
They do a lot of work towards the short story form, promoting it and all that. I wouldn't, but it's not like the big mainstream, which is
Mm.
fine because we don't always need to operate in that mainstream, But the short story form is part of our own South Asian literary heritage. So in a way, if we're being dissuaded from writing them, it's like, well, but that's my heritage, you know? All these little things that go towards our colonization. So we
Mm.
don't need to co-opt Western literary forms. I mean, I saw this amazing talk, this writer, Matthew Castle. Go to Jenny Bhatt. Jenny Bhatt runs a Desi Lit book club on Insta.
Oh, I'm
And
writing this down.
he interviewed Matthew Salas, and he's written an extraordinary book about the decolonization of literary forms and how to do it. And I stayed up till midnight because it was in America, and I watched it, and it was really cool. It was exactly what we all need to hear. He's done a great job. Yeah, Matthew Salas. It's called Craft in the Real World. And he is a warrior, like a decolonization warrior. So if you get to hear him talk, do so. Um, so it was cool. He was saying all the right things,
Mm.
like it was like very writerly kind of stuff, but it makes complete sense. The decolonization is also within the literary form.
And
Like,
it's about how that change is made and what shape that should take as well. Because, like you
exactly.
say, if writing short form and writing novella, if that's something that isn't widely accepted, then if it's part of our heritage,
Yeah.
how do we preserve that? How do we take that
Yeah.
forward? And maybe it's a case of thinking about establishing our own, you know, establishing our own platform whereby we can produce that.
Well, it's really cool. That within Pakistan, you see, what I've been observing is as always, Pakistan is the kind of place where if you want to do something and the means to do it is not available, because it most certainly won't be, you just have to make it happen. So there's been a lot of small publishing, that are just, they're like, we want to do this because it's not there. So there's been a lot of awareness of these sort of traditional storytelling modes. So recently, and I think I shared it with you as well, this wonderful book about the merman in the kissa. The kissa is like a sort of it's like it can be a fable, but it's kind of like historical. So kissa is our own form of storytelling. So they're promoting it like that. The Musharraf Ali Faruqi, he's, which is so cool. It's like a merman book from South Asian heritage. So there's, I think everybody, this whole thing about decolonization is, yeah, but you need to do the work yourself, right?
Yeah.
And also, why do the South Asian sort of book clubs and Insta bookstagrammers have to just be for the South Asian community? You know, it doesn't need to be insular. Like, everyone can seek them out to learn more if they want to sort of broaden the horizons. Um, and I say support Pakistani publishing
I
because
agree.
it's so hard for them and they're all doing such a great job.
Because I didn't know too much about it until I met you,
Yeah.
and it's extraordinary. I love hearing about it, and I've loved learning more about it as
And
well.
and hopefully you'll hear more about it from when you're doing the South Asian Heritage Month, which
Hmm.
is coming up July to, is it?
So we are, yeah, we're the 18th of July to the 17th of August. It is now going to happen every single year. Um, and we launched in Parliament in 2019. We had our first official year last year, and we will be continuing every single year. And we end on the anniversary of partition. And I'm literary lead, which is very, very exciting. And I believe as well, Sascha, we've got you on board for a couple of things, haven't we? So, in terms of your translation work and your work with Stephen Spender Trust, you're very, very kindly going to be doing some language workshops for us in Urdu, so we can have taster sessions and people can come along and experience the work that you do and see how wonderful you are. And that's open to everybody. This isn't just for South Asian people, it's for people that just have an interest in what it's like. I went to the Stephen Spender Trust Korean poetry workshop at Oxford University, and I'm very much a beginner in that language, and it was extraordinary. You didn't need to, there were people of all skill levels, you didn't need to have any understanding of that language, but the format that these workshops take is it's so inclusive, and it's for everybody, and that's really, it's such a treat that you're doing this for us in Urdu, and we're just so happy to have you. And we'll be doing a panel as well with Charlotte and with you. And Charlotte's she's I can't remember her
Correct.
role in Stephen Spender. She's the director. She's the director of Stephen Spender. And then we have another author as well, Faiza Nugen, who's based in Berlin, who does similar work to you with language workshops. She does it via Zoom all throughout Europe. So we'll have the three of you together, and we'll be talking about the importance of language and preserving our mother tongues, and what that looks like now when we are dealing with a generation of people that have grown up in this system that fragments all of that experience, and how that looks when we're trying to access it again, and there's so many different complex emotions around it, and I can't wait for that panel also. And your poetry spotlight, your Urdu spotlight, which you are judging this year, the Stephen Spender Trust have very, very kindly extended the deadline so that it will move into the beginning of South Asian Heritage Month. So that's now part of our lit program, and we're very, very happy to include it. So yeah, we just think you're fantastic, and we're so grateful for all the work that you're doing within this space, and for our community, for South Asian literature, and for Pakistani literature as well. And where can we buy this book? Please tell us where we can buy this book, because everybody should read it. It is fantastic. You can put sticky tabs in yours as well if you want to, but it's
I love your
fantastic.
tabs. I think that Carly, who is our behind the scenes tech and moderator, has put the no, we'll put the link in the Q&A, but basically go to the 87 press.
Yeah, it's
go.
actually in the chat. So if anyone
that.
wants the link, just have a look at the chat. And we've also got both Sascha and Natasha's social media handles. So do check those out as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think this video is going to be on YouTube as well. It will be available on YouTube for you if you want to watch it later. And we'll put all of the links in the description as well, so you can buy Sascha's wonderful, wonderful book as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we are just about out of time, aren't we? But we could talk all day. I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you, and so grateful for this beautiful book, and I will continue to share it with my mother and lend it to all of my friends. And it's been such a joy and such a pleasure.
Oh, it's totally likewise. There's a mutual admiration club here, and I'm so glad we got to do this.
Me too.
Right?
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much to the Stay at Home Lit Festival. This has been a wonderful experience, and we can't wait to see what else you have planned. Their program of events is fantastic. It is all free for you to join. The Eventbrite link that you registered with, you should have got a PDF email to you. You can access all of their extraordinary events. They're all cross-platform and fantastic. So definitely check those out. And we shall see you soon. Thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Carly. And thanks, you
Joanna
guys
and Carly
out there. And Natasha, thank